My wife hid her affair while I worked 80-hour weeks, so I signed the divorce papers and took every asset she ever thought was hers. I'm a 34-year-old guy who always believed that hard work and loyalty were the foundations of a strong marriage. From the moment I signed the mortgage papers, I promised myself I'd do whatever it took to create stability for Lila and me. That meant 80-hour weeks, working through nights that blurred into mornings, skipping vacations I'd always dreamed of, and shelving hobbies that once gave me joy. I barely noticed the exhaustion anymore. The hum of the office, the fluorescent lights, the constant clatter of keyboards and ringing phones became my second home. At first, Lila seemed genuinely appreciative. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she'd say, curling her hand around mine after a long day. Her words felt like validation, like all the sacrifice was worth it. Friends and family chimed in too, often remarking how lucky she was to have me, how rare it was to see someone so devoted. Those compliments swelled me with pride. I was building a life people admired, a life I thought was unshakable. And for a while, it felt perfect. Our tiny apartment smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread on mornings. I had the rare luxury to make breakfast, and I'd watch her move around the kitchen, humming softly, convinced that this was happiness. The bills were paid, the fridge full, and the savings slowly growing, a quiet but steady foundation. I told myself that love didn't need grand gestures, just consistency, support, and loyalty, and I poured every ounce of myself into that belief. But then, little things began creeping in, like shadows over sunlight. A late text she quickly hid, a dinner she claimed was with friends but smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I brushed them off at first, telling myself I was being paranoid, that my mind was overworked and tired. Yet an unsettling knot began forming in my chest, an echo that something wasn't right. For the first time, I noticed a crack in what I thought was perfection, a subtle tremor in the foundation I'd spent years constructing. And even as I tried to ignore it, a quiet dread started whispering that my life and my marriage might not be as aligned as I believed. The red flags started small but relentless, like a slow leak in a dam I thought was unbreakable. Lila began staying out later than usual, sometimes claiming work dinners or happy hours with colleagues. But I'd catch fleeting glimpses of a message disappearing from her phone whenever I walked into the room. "It's nothing. You're imagining things," she said one night, brushing past me, a faint tension in her jaw I couldn't ignore. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the knot in my chest tightened with every fib, every evasive glance. Even at work, my mind wandered in quiet moments, picturing her smiling at someone else while I was stuck in fluorescent-lit hell, answering emails I couldn't ignore. I told myself I was overworked, that maybe stress was twisting reality, but the unease gnawed at me day and night. Friends began to notice changes in me. "You seem off, man," my buddy Paul said after a late shift. "Are you sure everything's okay at home?" I laughed it off, but the doubt had already taken root. Nights became restless. I'd wake in a cold sweat imagining scenarios I hoped weren't real. Lila's once warm smile started to feel rehearsed, her laughter a note slightly off-key. Even our apartment, once a haven, felt heavy and suffocating. The ticking clock loud in the silence, the hum of the fridge like a metronome counting down the seconds I couldn't take back. One Friday evening, she claimed she had to stay late at the office, yet her perfume lingered faintly, unfamiliar and sharp, on the couch. I pretended to watch TV, heart hammering, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew that this was no small lie. Something was festering under the surface, and I was already standing at the edge, peering into a truth I wasn't ready to face. The life I thought was perfect was starting to unravel, and I had no idea how far the cracks went, or how much they would cost me. It hit me like a punch to the chest the night I saw the message I shouldn't have. I was cleaning up some paperwork when her phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it, not proud of it, but curiosity got the better of me and froze. There it was, a string of flirty texts from someone named Tom. My chest tightened, a cold sweat forming across my back. "It's harmless," I whispered to myself, trying to rationalize it, but the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. I knew, deep down, that nothing about it was harmless. I confronted her gently at first, keeping my voice low so I didn't sound like a man unraveling. "Lila, who's Tom?" I asked, hoping for some absurd explanation. She laughed, a little too brightly, and waved her hand dismissively. "He's just a coworker. Don't be dramatic," she said, brushing past me like I was imagining things again. That was the problem. She had perfected the act of making me question my own instincts. Even as my stomach churned, I nodded, forced a smile, and retreated to the bedroom, feeling more isolated than ever. Days passed, and the unease settled into every corner of our life. The scent of her perfume lingered on the couch, on the coffee mug she left behind, each whiff a reminder that she wasn't entirely mine. I couldn't sleep. My dreams were filled with her laughing with him, sharing inside jokes I'd never know about. At work, my productivity slipped, my mind wandering to the apartment I once loved but now felt like a cage. Friends' advice felt like noise. I couldn't talk to them about it without sounding paranoid, without risking sounding like a fool. I tried to focus on what I had built, our home, our life, the sacrifices I made to make it perfect. But the sight of that single text haunted me, each unread message a needle threading doubt and anger through my chest. I realized something terrifying. My world wasn't crumbling slowly. It was shaking at its foundation. And I had no idea how deep the betrayal went. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The unease that had been simmering boiled over the day. I decided to follow my gut and hire a private investigator. Part of me felt ridiculous, ashamed even, but another part of me knew that I had to uncover the truth before it consumed me completely. A week later, the reports came in, and I sat frozen on the edge of our couch, hands trembling, staring at the evidence I never wanted to see. Hotel receipts, dinner tabs, pictures of her laughing with Tom, texts arranged in a timeline that left no room for doubt. My chest tightened, my stomach turned, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The life I had poured myself into, the 80-hour weeks, the skipped vacations, the sleepless nights, all of it had been funding someone else's secret world. I confronted her again, trying to keep my voice steady, but it broke before the sentence did. "Lila, why? How long?" My words hung heavy in the air, my own disbelief echoing back at me. She glanced up, eyes wide for a fraction of a second, before smoothing her expression into something calm, almost casual. "It's complicated," she said softly, then shrugged, like she was explaining why the sky was blue. I felt the walls of our apartment closing in, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the distant sounds of the city outside. They all mocked me. Even standing there, rage and heartbreak warring inside me, I realized that I had been blind. I had believed that love, loyalty, and financial stability were enough to secure a marriage. But none of that mattered when deception had rooted itself so deeply beneath the surface. I felt like I had been living in a carefully staged play, every sacrifice and act of devotion serving as a backdrop for her secret life. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment, once warm with the smell of coffee and fresh laundry, now felt like a cage. Every laugh I thought was ours, every quiet evening spent planning our future, now felt like a lie. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that this was only the beginning, that the betrayal went deeper than I had imagined. After seeing the proof, my world started unraveling in ways I hadn't anticipated. Even though I had the evidence in hand, the emotional weight of it made every day a struggle to get through. I couldn't focus at work. The spreadsheets and emails blurred into one continuous gray haze, my mind replaying images of Lila and Tom in restaurants, in hotel lobbies, smiling while I sacrificed everything. I started noticing little things everywhere. The faint scent of her perfume on the pillow, the way her laughter sometimes sounded rehearsed, too perfect. Every memory of our shared life twisted in my chest, making me feel like a fool for believing in loyalty, in sacrifice, in us. Friends tried to check in. "You okay, man?" Paul asked after another long day. I forced a laugh and said, "Yeah, just tired." But they didn't see the nights I spent scrolling through evidence, replaying conversations, wondering how someone could love me and lie to me at the same time. Even family comments like, "She's so lucky to have you," felt like knives, reminding me that everyone else still believed the image I had carefully constructed while my life burned behind the curtain. I started documenting everything in secret, screenshots of messages, bank transfers, photos from the investigator, everything I could use if the betrayal went further than just emotional cheating. I didn't want revenge yet. I wasn't ready. I just needed proof, something concrete to cling to amid the chaos of my thoughts and the gnawing feeling of betrayal. One night, I came home earlier than expected. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock, and the smell of her perfume lingering on the couch. My stomach churned as I noticed a receipt on the counter, a hotel I had never heard of, dated that very evening. My heart sank. I realized she was still living a double life, hiding entire nights from me even now. And in that moment, I understood with absolute clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, and it was far from over. The truth hit me harder than I ever imagined. Lila hadn't just been cheating emotionally. She had been siphoning money, moving assets, and hiding accounts I didn't even know existed. I was going through some bills one night when I noticed discrepancies, withdrawals I hadn't authorized, transfers to accounts in her name, unexplained charges. My hands shook as I pulled up the bank statements, each line a punch to my chest. Months of savings I thought were ours had quietly vanished, funding her affair and a secret life I had no access to. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial, complete, and meticulously hidden. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mix of rage, disbelief, and deep, piercing hurt. I remembered all the nights I worked through exhaustion, all the weekends I sacrificed with friends and family, all the plans I shelved so we could secure our future. And for what? Every ounce of my loyalty, every sacrifice, had been fueling her lies. How could she? I whispered aloud, voice cracking in the empty apartment. It was a turning point. Until that moment, I had felt like a powerless victim, blindsided by deception. Now, a cold clarity settled in. I realized that knowledge was power, and I could use it. The tables were shifting. I started gathering everything. Screenshots of messages, bank transfers, hotel receipts, evidence from the private investigator. Every small detail mattered. Every hidden expense and secret meeting was documented. I began making quiet plans, consulting legal advice discreetly, and considering every angle. My heartbreak turned into strategy, my fury into precision. I wasn't just going to confront her emotionally. I was going to reclaim everything she thought she had stolen. And yet, even with this clarity, a hollow ache settled in my chest. How deep did her betrayal go? And how long would it take for the reality to finally hit her? Once I understood the full scope of Lila's deception, I went into quiet, calculated action. I spent nights compiling evidence, organizing everything she had tried to hide, the texts, the emails, the bank statements, even the hotel receipts. Every small detail, every lie she had woven into our life, was now a weapon in my hands. I reached out discreetly to a lawyer I trusted, explaining the situation without revealing too much too soon. They confirmed what I feared and hoped. Her hidden assets gave me full leverage. Suddenly, years of blind loyalty and sacrifice felt like armor, not chains. I also started talking to a few close friends, those who had noticed things over time but had never said anything. I knew something was off. One whispered, eyes wide when I showed them evidence. Their reactions fueled my resolve. I wasn't insane, and I wasn't alone in seeing through her mask. I made careful notes, created timelines, and cross-referenced messages with financial activity. Each connection I discovered felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she had tried to erase. Even everyday life became a stage for subtle observation. The faint smell of her perfume, the way she spoke when she thought I wasn't listening, every laugh, every sigh, it all carried new meaning. I began seeing her patterns, understanding her methods, and anticipating her moves. The emotional pain was still there, gnawing at my chest like a constant reminder, but it was now tempered with control. I realized I was no longer a passive victim. I had become the architect of my own response. I could strike without emotion clouding my judgment, using every hidden fact and secret she thought was safe against her. The power shift was intoxicating, but I had to be careful. One wrong move could ruin everything. And as I watched her live her double life, smiling and unsuspecting, a cold determination settled in. Soon, she would realize that nothing she had tried to hide was beyond my reach. I finally decided it was time to confront her, and I knew I had to stay calm. The apartment felt heavier than ever, the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking clock mocking the storm building inside me. I held the folder of evidence in my hands, each page a testament to her lies, her deceit, and the life she had stolen from me. "Lila, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, though my chest felt like it was on fire. She looked up from the couch, pretending casualness, that smile I once loved plastered on her face. I laid it all out in front of her, the messages, the hotel receipts, the bank statements showing hidden accounts and transfers. I kept my tone calm, almost clinical, but the weight behind each word was undeniable. "How long?" I asked softly, and she blinked, caught off guard. I don't know what you're talking about," she said, a tremor in her voice betraying her practiced composure. I could see the cracks starting to form. She tried to gaslight me, brushing things off, twisting words, turning it around as if I were the paranoid one. But for once, it didn't work. I had the proof, and every attempt at deflection fell flat against the evidence. The apartment felt stifling, the air thick with tension, the faint city sounds outside fading into nothingness as our confrontation consumed the room. "You lied to me. Every day, every hour, every sacrifice I made was feeding this," I said, voice low but firm. I could see panic and anger flashing in her eyes, the first real fear she had shown in months. I stayed calm, letting the weight of her actions hang between us, watching as the woman who had deceived me for so long realized she was finally exposed. And in that tense silence, as she struggled to find words, I knew the balance had shifted. I wasn't the man blindly devoted anymore. I was the one holding the power. After the confrontation, I knew I had to act quickly and decisively. I filed for divorce quietly, making sure every joint asset, property, and account was legally secured under my control. My lawyer reviewed the evidence I had collected, and each document, each screenshot, each bank transfer became ammunition I could use to ensure nothing she tried to claim would stick. Lila tried to protest, claiming unfairness, manipulation, even suggesting I was overreacting, but the proof was undeniable. I could almost see the color drain from her face every time a new piece of evidence was presented. Court filings became a strange mix of relief and vindication. I'd sit in my apartment late at night, listening to the faint hum of the city outside, and feel the weight of months of deception lifting. The money she had tried to hide, the assets she thought were untouchable, were now within reach, secured and documented beyond dispute. Friends who had once watched me silently struggle now checked in, offering support, shock, and quiet admiration. "You did what you had to," one whispered, and it felt like validation I hadn't known I needed. Every legal maneuver was a reminder that loyalty and sacrifice alone were not enough. They had to be paired with awareness, strategy, and self-respect. I stayed calm in the courtroom, letting my evidence speak louder than any outburst, and each ruling was a small victory, a reclamation of what was rightfully mine. Even the small details mattered, the hidden accounts, the hotel charges, the transfers she thought I'd never notice. And yet, despite the victories piling up, I couldn't ignore the emptiness that lingered. The betrayal still ached in my chest, a constant echo of trust shattered and love misused. But I was in control now, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of empowerment amidst the pain. I had reclaimed what was mine, but the final confrontation, the one that would leave her stunned and me vindicated, was still ahead. Even with every legal victory, the emptiness hit me like a tidal wave. I sat alone in the apartment we once shared, surrounded by the quiet hum of the fridge and the faint street sounds drifting in, and felt a hollow ache I hadn't anticipated. Years of devotion, nights spent working myself to exhaustion, every skipped vacation, every sleepless weekend, they had been erased by her lies. I realized that no amount of legal maneuvering, no reclaiming of money or property, could undo the emotional toll. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever imagined. I thought about our mornings together, the quiet breakfasts I used to cherish, the laughter over small jokes, the comfort I felt in thinking we were building a life together. And now, all of that felt like a cruel illusion, a play stage to hide her secret life. I questioned everything, my judgment, my worth, even the concept of trust itself. Could I ever believe in someone again? Could I ever open my heart without fear? The loneliness was suffocating, the sense of being utterly misled, leaving me gasping for something solid to hold on to. I tried to distract myself with work, late nights at the office, endless spreadsheets, but even those hours felt meaningless. Friends' reassurances felt distant, their words like echoes in a cavern I couldn't escape. Even the little joys, coffee in the morning, music on the commute, tasted flat, empty. I realized that the rock-bottom moment wasn't about losing assets or seeing the betrayal. It was about feeling that the life I believed I had built had been stolen, leaving only grief and disbelief behind. As I sat there, staring at the city lights through the window, a faint, cold clarity began to creep in. I understood that I couldn't stay in this place forever, that revenge, justice, and reclaiming my life weren't just about legal wins. They were about rebuilding myself, piece by piece. But even with that realization, the pain was raw, and I had no idea how much it would take to truly move forward. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of relief and vindication. Every asset, every account, every ounce of money she thought she could hide was now legally mine. Lila tried to argue, to twist the narrative, but the evidence was airtight. Messages, receipts, bank statements, everything meticulously documented. For once, I watched her struggle and falter, seeing the fear and disbelief in her eyes. "I can't believe you did all this," she whispered, voice trembling, as if realizing too late that her deception had been exposed. And I stayed calm, letting the silence speak louder than any words. Friends and family were shocked, some even offering tentative congratulations. "I didn't think you had it in you," Paul said quietly when we met for coffee. But I didn't need applause. The victory was mine in the quiet knowledge that I had reclaimed everything she thought she could take and done it with dignity and control. Every hidden account, every secret expense, every betrayal was now documented in my favor, a tangible reminder that loyalty and intelligence could overpower deceit. I felt a power I hadn't experienced before, a shift from victim to victor, from the man who blindly sacrificed to the one who took control of his life. I could finally breathe, knowing that the life I had built through hard work and patience hadn't been erased, only temporarily overshadowed. Lila's attempts to manipulate me were meaningless now. She was exposed, and I had the last word. Even standing there, I understood something deeper. Justice wasn't about punishment alone. It was about reclaiming yourself, asserting boundaries, and refusing to let betrayal define your worth. I left the courtroom that day with a calm determination, knowing that while the scars remained, I was finally free. The tables had turned, and I had emerged stronger, smarter, and fully in control of the life she had tried to steal from me. And as I walked back to my apartment, the city lights flickering in the distance, I realized that this was more than revenge, it was empowerment. After the divorce was finalized, the apartment felt different, lighter, quieter, and for the first time in years, truly mine. I still felt the sting of betrayal, the memories of late nights, secret texts, and stolen moments haunting me, but they no longer held power over me. I spent mornings making coffee slowly, listening to the city wake outside the window, savoring the ordinary life I had once taken for granted. Every sound, every smell, every little routine became a reminder that I could exist without the weight of her lies pressing down on me. Therapy helped me unpack the years of sacrifice, the misplaced trust, and the sense that my love had been exploited. I learned that loyalty isn't weakness, but blind devotion without awareness can leave you vulnerable. Slowly, I rebuilt my routines, my friendships, and even my hobbies, things I had abandoned to support a life that wasn't fully shared. I realized that independence wasn't just about money or property. It was about knowing my worth, setting boundaries, and refusing to let anyone else dictate my value. Friends who had stayed close reminded me that I was not alone, that the betrayal was hers, not mine. I started dating again tentatively, not for revenge or to prove anything, but because I wanted companionship on my own terms. Nights no longer ended with anxiety and dread. They ended with quiet reflection, music in the background, the hum of the city outside, and the comforting sense that I could finally breathe. Looking back, I understood that the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was losing myself in the process. Now, I had reclaimed both my life and my identity. I was free to live, to love cautiously, to trust deliberately, and to protect the life I had fought so hard to rebuild. And strangely, for the first time in years, I felt whole again. This story closes not with anger or regret, but with quiet triumph. The life she tried to steal from me is now fully, unmistakably mine.